My name's Carol McQuire. I was in the New Kadam tradition for 12 years. I was a nun for about 8 years. And we've come to this public teaching in London with Kelsang Dekyong, who is the director of the NKT. We've come because it was a public teaching, which means a free teaching and advertised in the street, so that anyone could drop into this teaching. You don't have to be, it's not a study program, it's an open free thing. So we thought that the general public should know that this group is engaging in demonstrations against His Holiness the Dalai Lama. Because a lot of people get interested in Tibetan Buddhism in the first place because of His Holiness. So it's very difficult once you're inside the group, because they're very friendly, the teachings are very attractive, and people think that the teachings are they're very helpful, they change their lives completely, but people think that the teachings belong to the NKT and that they won't get the teachings elsewhere. And so this beginning feeling of wanting to be closer to someone like the Dalai Lama, wanting to follow his example, and then finding out later that they are engaging in this defamation campaign against him, it's very, very difficult then to leave the group. So we want people to understand before they listen to the group that they need to check it out, they need to think about it, they need to research more, they need to understand a little bit more of what's going on before they say, oh, this is wonderful, we love Buddhist teachings, we're going to do this. And most British people, from a lot of countries, we don't think we need to check out Buddhism. Because of people like His Holiness the Dalai Lama, we think Buddhists are going to be ethical, and Buddhists are not going to have any problems. It's going to be very easy. There's no issues whatsoever. So Westerners don't tend to check any kind of group out. So we are saying to people, think of it as a religion. Instead of thinking Buddhism, think religion, and then assess what the group is like. Think about what, the teachings are only by one person. You don't get to see that person. It's 20 books that you study written only by one person who's been expelled from his monastery. And you will be completely separate from other Tibetan Buddhist groups, completely separate. And maybe at a certain point you'll think, oh, well, maybe it doesn't matter that they're doing this against the Dalai Lama, because I really like this. And maybe they're actually right about the Dalai Lama. But all the research we've been doing, we've been coming up with a lot of evidence showing that what they're saying is actually a defamation campaign. It's not, they are using threads of things that may be true and adding them to things that are completely untrue and then giving a false impression. And from what some people have been saying, talking to me in the NKT, people inside the group haven't even seen a lot of these videos and didn't even know that their own group members are disturbing the teachings of His Holiness, going inside the teachings of His Holiness and shouting at His Holiness while His Holiness is talking. People inside the NKT don't even know that's happening. So I'm just I'm here with a friend and other friends as well, just to inform the public. We've been giving out leaflets to say, check a group out before you join it. Don't join it quickly. And if you respect His Holiness, please check out this group really, really well before you join it. I was in the NKT for 12 years. I joined it in around 1994 in Mexico. And what happened is I had some teachings, and then I had a friend who was in a Kagyu group. And this is another reason why I'm here today. The Kagyus told my friend not to talk to me anymore because I was with the NKT, and I really, really wished that this whole subject of Shugden had been open and been talked about. I think these things need to be talked about because I joined it very early. There had been problems with the teacher who started this group called Kelsang Gyatso had taken a centre from another group in England. So the whole thing started up in a very difficult way, and that was all hidden. Everybody, let's just forget about it, let's just leave it and let him have the centre, let him do these things. And I think if all these things had been talked about a lot more, debates, open discussion, lots and lots of people talking about it, not just a small group, then I would have been much safer, because the problems that were in the group at the beginning carried on and got deeper. We had an ordination, and I found out later that the ordination was actually it was an invented ordination. It wasn't an ordination like Buddha Shakyamuni's ordinations. It's different from every other ordination. I tried to practice like an ethical person. I tried to be honest, and what happened is I found out that my various people in the group were doing things that were really, I thought, very unethical. So I talked about it with senior, not very senior, but fairly senior people in the group. And then I was asked to leave. I was evicted. I lived at the centre for quite a few years, 7-8 years. And I was told to leave immediately. So when you come across, when the NKT are talking about Shugden practitioners being made homeless and all those kind of things in India, actually it happened to a lot of people in Britain. So I was asking a lot of questions about the group by then, because I felt very, how should I say, isolated, very as if my practice wasn't really, I felt as if it was like a treadmill. We were working too hard. I was getting very exhausted. I was running courses. I was cleaning. I was teaching. We had to do too much. And along with the problem with the ethics, if I was the person that was being ethical, but I was asked to leave, it was like the wrong way around. There was normally if there's a problem in a group, the management would sit down, they would discuss it, they would try other things to do, but simply they said, if you're complaining, you have to leave. And so after I left, I found out that the same kind of thing was happening in a lot of other centres, and there were quite a few people who had left the group. But when you are ordained in the NKT, you can't take your ordination to other places. It's only an ordination for the group. So I couldn't carry on being a nun. I wanted to still be a nun. So because I knew the group wasn't a safe group, I had to disrobe to be ethical. It sounds all wrong, right? It's like I had to break my monastic vows to be ethical. Now that's not right. So that kind of muddle is what a lot of people get into. There's a lot of confusion because the teachings are changed a little. So you can't simply go to another group and start again. You have a lot of concepts that are quite different. So some people leaving the group, they feel really confused. They go to other Buddhist teachings and it's like, why is this like this and why is this different? And because the language there has changed things, and some of the meanings are changed, some of the teachings have changed. So it becomes, I would say, almost dangerous in a spiritual way if things are being changed in that way. And I think the very sadness is that people inside the NKT don't know that. I didn't know that inside the NKT. I come outside, I've gone 7 years to other teachings from Sakya, from the Kagyus, from the Dalai Lama, from the Nyingmas, from the Geluks, all different schools, all different places I've gone to have a look. And what the NKT doing is very different and very watered down and quite changed and very tight. All the books are just that group. All the Tibetan things we had in the 1990s, they've been taken out. And it's become something quite strange that isn't either Tibetan or modern. It's a strange, very strange mix that can be it's like a little world that is all inside a little bubble. So I feel those kind of issues, having talked with so many survivors, people are still coming out the group saying this didn't work, people were unkind, there were these problems. If you complain or say something's wrong, they say, well, you can leave, just leave. If you don't like it, just leave. There's no democracy inside the group. Nothing of that. It's run from the top. I thought it was just a group around me in my centre, and when I left, slowly I started contacting other people who'd left, and it turned out that lots of people have very similar experiences in different centres. And it's still happening. The NKT say they've changed, but we're still getting people coming out. I sold my house, I gave the money to the group. I spent 10 years there, I have no career anymore. Because often you live on the government benefits and live inside the centre and you're just working for the centre. So you lose contact with anything that can support you. So survivors often come out very disoriented and very confused about what to do, especially if they disrobe. Who am I? Am I a nun or not a nun? Am I really in the NKT or out of the NKT? Am I this? Because you've done so many meditations and it goes so deep into your mind, you get quite stuck. And the mantras, it took about 5 years for all the NKT teachings to stop saying themselves in my head. You know, it's kind of...
And I think
it's difficult to explain how tied. You get very tied to the group. This is something that the NKT actually say is very good about their group. That's why they call it modern Buddhism. They say you can forget about all these Tibetan things, you can do absolutely everything in English, everything's very easy, no problem, right? You can leave all the Tibetan Buddhism behind. That's what they say is very good. Now, I think what they have presented is actually such a tiny part that has been cut out of Tibetan Buddhism and then put into the books. You know, it's like... Sometimes, if you talk about the westernization of things, you can talk like Disney Dharma or McDonald's Dharma or something like that. You're taking a product and you're making it easy to sell. So you're making lots of centers, a lot of expansion. You need more teachers. If you have a lot of centers, you need more teachers, so you have to train the teachers quickly. So you have to have a system that you can do very quickly. And you have to get people involved very quickly. People like it. What I think is missing is that to be safe psychologically, you need the complexity of the explanations. If you just have a part, and I was talking to someone from the NKT this week, we were saying that we felt there were lots of gaps in the teaching, and he agreed. He said, yes, there are lots. And I say, I think what happens is Westerners fill in the gaps because there's questions that aren't answered. We think a lot and we fill in the gaps. But we can be really, really, really mistaken because your culture, our culture, and Buddhism, sometimes Buddhism has very, very sophisticated concepts that as Westerners we can't see them without a lot of explanation. And we put our own cultural things on top of the Buddhism. But there's the issue as well, saying, well, if Buddhism is Buddhism, you should take the Tibetan bit out of it and it can still be Buddhism. But I think you have to be very, very careful there because you have to put the cut in the right place. Because it's like the baby in the bathwater, no? If you take too much out, if we are looking at Tibetan Buddhism, you need to keep the essence of it. You need to keep the explanations. The deeper you go into your mind, you need more complex explanations. They don't have the deeper, complex explanations. So I think it's very, very dangerous that we separate, as modern Buddhists, that we separate from your culture too quickly. I think it's very dangerous. Now, in your tradition, people are training 20, 30 years, retreats, exams, debates, absolutely everything. And moral, because you're in communities, people are watching other people for their moral discipline. You know if someone is going off the rails and they won't get a Geshe qualification or Geshe Larampa or anything if they are unkind people or if the power goes to their heads or something, they won't get those qualifications. So there's a containment in community. Now, the NKT doesn't have that containment. There's not enough supervision. So you get very new teachers going out to, like in America, new centers. There's a new center on Hollywood Boulevard. No? There's people who haven't been in the NKT for very long, maybe just a few years, and in charge of a whole group of 20, 30, 40, hundreds of people maybe coming to classes. They don't have the spiritual maturity that comes from 30 years training that you have in your tradition. So to say that we can just, cut out the Tibetan system and make a new one, I don't think is safe. It's too soon.
Thank you.
That's how I would summarize it, just from that experience. On Tenzin Paljo's blog, he's been extremely helpful because he's a fully ordained monk. He was in the NKT for 5 years, and then he was with other Shugden people, and then he became fully ordained with the Dalai Lama, so he has a context for both sides. And on Tenzin's blog, I tried to discuss what I discussed at SOAS with the person in the NKT, right? Because I'm discussing the text of the Shugden and what it says in Khalsen Gyatso's books, because it talks about the pure and you won't make mistakes, this kind of thing where you get too big, you get too unrealistically confident, right? This person can't seem to talk about what the text says. And I think if you can't talk about those kind of things, there's a problem. And my talk at SOAS was about those kind of things. Because for instance, if I go to see a Tibetan teacher about something, we'll have a text and we'll analyze it. You look at the debates they do in the monasteries now. You look, with you're analyzing every concept so that you understand it really well. And it's very positive to ask questions. And the point of asking questions is so that you get answers that you can think about, understand, use, meditate with, right? Now, if a group can't look at its own texts and look at what it's doing, what's going on? So, because they don't want, the only conclusion I can come to is that they don't want people to actually look at what they're doing. Why be frightened of what I'm saying if I'm just looking at the texts? And in my talk, they said I was talking about my life in the NKT. I wasn't. I was only talking about Shugden. So there's a contradiction there, isn't it? If they can't talk about their own texts, I would say that to NKT people, why can't you talk about your own texts? No?
That's very clear. Thank you.